Welcome to the CEC Report. It's the 2nd of September. I'm Robert Barwick and I'm joined today by CEC leader Craig Isherwood. Welcome, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie.
In this week's CEC Report, who doesn't want Australia to join the new Silk Road? And Australia has already had a Royal Commission into banks. Apply it. But Craig, first, before we go into that, I want to just recap two news items that we won't get to deal with in depth today, but just to point people to where they can look it up. This week was the 19th anniversary of the death of Princess Diana and Dodi Al Fayed. And when I say death, I should say murder, because that's what it was. And that's not a conspiracy theory. The jury of the official inquest into their deaths ruled it was an unlawful killing, which is the equivalent of murder when you don't name the killer and the motive, right? But that was the ruling on this. So we've been part of an effort to publicise this around the world ever since that. We worked with the extraordinary Australian investigator John Morgan, who died last year, but he produced 10 books on this. So this week we issued a press release on it. I just want viewers to know that they can go to our website, see the press release on it, and that press release shows people how they can get a copy of the tribute to John Morgan that we produced that has testimonials from people as to the quality of his work and also a sample of his research in there, right? So that's something that people should look at, because this is something that we still need to get justice for Princess Diana. She was killed because she was a threat to the British establishment, right? The British Crown establishment. And John Morgan says she was killed by that establishment, and he charges by the Crown itself. So that's one thing. Secondly, just quickly, this week, the president of Brazil, Dilma Rousseff, was impeached. She's no longer president. She's out. Her term will be served by her vice president, who was part of the corrupt conspiracy against her to force her out. Dilma Rousseff was targeted because she led her country, which is a very important country, Brazil, one of the biggest in the world, into the BRICS. Yeah. The Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa arrangement. The BRICS, which is the biggest threat to the Anglo-American world dominance, right? And they're all being targeted for that. Brazil was vulnerable, and she's been impeached for that reason. The media is not reporting this properly. It's just, but this is a coup that's happened in Brazil. We'll report it in future weeks, but that happened this week.
And I believe Venezuela's cut off diplomatic ties with Brazil at the moment because they recognise this as a coup, which is really quite something.
Yes. All right, so let's get on with today's show now. First, who doesn't want Australia to join the new Silk Road? And Craig, this is something extraordinary has also happened this week. It's the first week back in Parliament for a long time because we had the winter break and the election, etc. So all the parliamentarians returning to Canberra, which includes a huge number of new parliamentarians, they're all given what's called the briefing book, which is prepared by the Parliamentary Library, right? And it's just to orient them. In this briefing book that's been handed out this time, there's an article though, which is an extraordinary attack on China's One Belt, One Road project. And the essence of the article is, don't fall for the enthusiasm of the business community for this project. Now, we talk about this project all the time. This is the new Silk Road, Maritime Silk Road, that the Chinese call One Belt, One Road. And it's a massive infrastructure project to connect the east with the west along the old Silk Road routes that China developed centuries ago, with the best technology that can facilitate trade, etc. And China has invited the whole world to participate in this thing. And this is our region. And this is an invitation from our number one trading partner, right? But it has totally freaked out the United States, right, and the Europeans, because it's a sign of the economic strength of China, which is an economy based on investing in production, investing in infrastructure, while the transatlantic systems are collapsing.
And right? I think, Robbie, the indicator for that is that, well, look, the question of the One Belt, One Road program was not raised during the election, typical. No. Right? Here you have the most strategic infrastructure development projects in the world in this region, and it wasn't even mentioned during the election.
But what was mentioned was the South China Sea fiasco.
Of course.
Right? but not this side of it.
And now what we've got coming up, which I don't know how many of our viewers realise this, but China is now hosting the next G20. And immediately Xi Jinping has put on the agenda the fact that he's terribly concerned about the fact that global financial architecture, the way it exists now, that the huge amount of debt, the derivatives and so forth, is unsustainable, and something has to be done. In fact, there was a report put out, just recently, I think it was by the Bank for International Settlements, saying that their counterparty clearing houses, which are supposed to deal with the over-the-counter derivatives bets, is failing.
Yeah, they were supposed to take away the risk. They have become the risk themselves.
That's right. And Xi Jinping is saying, look, we can't be hostage to the $600 trillion derivatives bubble, therefore we have to have alternatives. And of course there are alternatives in the system. And his, as he's demonstrated as part of the BRICS, they are moving very rapidly to make sure that large grand infrastructure development projects become the economic driver for all countries on the face of the planet.
Because that is the alternative. You can either have what some people call a financialised economy, where everything is based on shuffling paper around, or an economy where everything's based on doing stuff, producing stuff, building stuff that we all need.
Yeah, and
right?
what you've got with the new initiatives, you've got a whole raft of new financial institutions. You've got the Australian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB, which we
Asian
finally,
Infrastructure Investment Bank.
as we finally joined. You've got the BRICS New Development Bank. You've got the BRICS Contingency Fund for protecting BRICS countries against currency speculation. You've got the Silk Road Fund, and you've got a whole heap of other funds as well that are specifically designed to fund agriculture. And Robbie,
infrastructure.
Yeah, well, infrastructure and other things as well. But the point is that in our country, we're crying out for infrastructure.
Yeah.
You're getting more and more private consortiums coming together, calling for high-speed rail, for water projects and so forth. And yet, the government in this country says, no, we really, we're not really interested in looking towards China and to our partners to create the strategic partnerships necessary to build these things with the expertise that is there.
And we'll have a map on the screen, which is what you've got in front of you there, which shows these routes that comprise the One Belt, One Road project. And what you can see is Australia is situated just below it, but there's no connecting links into Australia because we haven't taken up the opportunity. And then we'll put up another map, which is from one prepared by an old friend of ours, Lance Endersby, from proposals he was suggesting in the 90s, where we developed the Port of Darwin at the end of a high-speed railway line from Melbourne, but developed the Port of Darwin to support high-speed shipping that can take Australian goods into these huge Asian ports within 24, 48 hours, right? That is the fit in with this One Belt, One Road project.
Yeah, Robbie, the real danger for the government is the philosophy behind the existing economic ideas. Like free trade and globalisation is their modus operandi, right? Therefore, everything has to be done by, and also by private institutions, privatisation. So we've had since the 70s an absolute flurry of selling off our public infrastructure to private enterprises. We've had the promotion of public-private partnerships, boot schemes and all these sorts of things because government is bad. Big government is bad. Big corporations that are run by the government, or like the Snowy Mountain Scheme or the Tasmanian Hydroelectric Commission, are inefficient, which is actually a lie.
Rubbish. Yep.
And it's promoted as a method of private industry getting its hands on public infrastructure to loot it and to loot it blind. So what you have here is the Chinese government. Yes, it is a communist government, but it is promoting the idea that has worked in the past that governments have a role in developing infrastructure.
Which develop the United States, develop Europe. This is what we
And this is what they're freaking out about because the current model of globalisation, free trade, economic rationalism, privatisation of the last 30 to 40 years is being acknowledged as failing.
Yeah.
So this is what, and I can say, inside Australia, there's a big crisis coming because on the one hand, you have all these private institutions, private consortiums looking to build large-scale infrastructure projects, and they've got the funds to do it. I mean, you've got huge superannuation pools, not just in this country, but around the world. You've got huge amounts of private equity because you've had a speculative bubble build up in the world today. The problem is that they look to government for the guarantees, which means the government is asking the people of Australia, say, we want you to back us to give private consortiums 50, 100-year leases or access to public infrastructure. And the people, as we found from the last election, are saying, we don't want this. So the government can't give the guarantees to the private sector who have the money to build these things, and the private sector demands the government gives these guarantees, so the whole thing is becoming a stalemate. And this is the direction that we're going, and the current Parliament, as we're already seeing from day or week one, is a complete fiasco. So we're getting into a situation now where these sorts of ideas are that the One Belt, One Road are resonating so strongly in the business community that the government is going to be forced, whether it be a year or so or thereabouts, I don't know what the time frame is going to be, to actually look at this question of taking on real actual economic development from the point of view what we did do with the Snowy Mountain scheme in the Tasmanian Hydro.
Yeah, so let me just give the details on what this was in this briefing book though, because Craig, what we've established in this discussion is it is economic driven, that's the purpose of it. What this briefing book basically says by this character named Jeff Wade, who has a real anti-China bent. He's on an anti-China jihad, and he's an analyst who's got a job in the Parliamentary Library. The Parliamentary Library, people rely on, parliamentarians call up the library and say, can you give me a report on this, this and this? You assume you're getting objective information. Now this is a guy with an agenda against China, and what he's done is saying, the message in this briefing book to all politicians was, don't get excited about the new Silk Road, One Belt, One Road. Don't fall for the business community's enthusiasm for it. It's not about economics largely, it's not about trade, it's about China building a strategic bloc to counter the USA and validate its claims in the South China Sea. In other words, it's all about a geopolitical manipulation of the world. Here's the number one thing that proves that to be an absolute lie, a cynical lie designed to manipulate politicians to support an agenda which is eventually going to send us to war with China if it keeps up. In this project, China has invited the entire world to participate, including the USA. Whereas the big initiatives the US has done in Asia, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, it has excluded China. Now, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is a piece of garbage. That's good for China, it's excluded. But its exclusion is because it just wants to dominate that. And with the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, China invited America to join. Not only won't America join, America pressured us not to join and Japan not to join. That's the difference. So don't give us that this is China trying to flex its muscles and counter America. No, it's trying to create a new system for the world, right? And if we want a world with peace and economic development, we should participate in it. Anyway, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Royal Commission into Banking. Welcome back to the CEC Report. Australia has already had a Royal Commission into banks. Apply it. So, Craig, this week also in Parliament, the big issue actually publicly that has dominated Parliament is the Royal Commission into banks. And there's been all these amazing shenanigans. It's an interesting Parliament with such close numbers, so people can see that on the news themselves. But the question is, okay, what do we do about this situation with the banks? It's happening at a time of a looming banking crisis. That's what people have to understand. There's a crisis coming. So this week, CNBC reported a banker fearing a economic nuclear winter. That was the quote. They said, if you thought the first half of 2016 was bad for big international banks, quote, speaking on the condition of anonymity due to the sensitive nature of the topic, a source from a major investment bank told CNBC that financial services firms have put together a strategy in place that takes into account the worst case scenario that could happen by the end of this year. So that was CNBC. In Italy, you've got the world's oldest bank, Monte dei Paschi. There's been this drama, never-ending saga about bailing out this thing because it's in a terrible way. The latest bailout is now unravelling, and JP Morgan's scrambling to force the Italian government to get together with other governments and actually do this thing. Because the consequences, if a bank goes under, of a chain reaction. That's the fear, right? And then Bloomberg News reported this on Tuesday, that the derivatives market is set to blow, and their headline is did Brexit turn the derivatives market toxic? And what they've noted was that no one betting on currency rate fluctuations between the British pound and the euro anticipated the Brexit vote, right? Well, These are all bets, and if you don't anticipate the possibility of something going different, then you're going to lose big time, and these are losses that are in the system now, right? So this is all brewing over there, and is the backdrop to our discussion about a Royal Commission. If a global banking crisis happens, it'll hit Australia hard. Our debt has never been higher. It was much higher than 2008, and we've got this housing bubble that's just set to blow, and if it blows, then the whole banking system here goes with it. So therefore we've got this discussion. Now, let us say this. An investigation of the banks is always a good idea. And we've held up the model here many times of what's called known as the Pecora Commission, a 2-week Senate committee investigation in the United States just before Franklin Roosevelt came to power, which ripped the mask off the bankers and showed them for what they were. And actually, the people reporting it invented the term banksters because of that commission there. Australia needs that kind of thing. However, the question of a Royal Commission is a little bit different. Now, if that's the way it's going to happen, fine, but that's going to take a long time. We've already had a Royal Commission in banks. People may not understand that. And that came about in the 1930s. So what we're going to do is play a video. And this is what this video is from the Australian TV series Power Without Glory, which dramatised the 1930s debates over whether or not the government should issue new money through the Commonwealth Bank to create jobs, to alleviate unemployment and the depression. Red Ted Theodore, you'll see speaking, said we've got to do it. He was the treasurer, this is the Labor government, he ordered the Commonwealth Bank to do it, and the governor of the Commonwealth Bank, Sir Robert Gibson, said, I bloody well won't. And later on, in 1937, a Royal Commission was called into that. So have a look at the video quickly.
You can blame the nationalists if you like, but it won't make any difference to the public out there. And it won't get the country out of debt. Now, the fact is, Australia's been living beyond its means. We've got much too high a deficit. We're down on our balance of payments to the tune of,
The latest figure is £193 million.
Oh, that's terrible.
And our credit rating overseas is falling all the time.
Now, we've heard all this, Joe. Get to the point.
Let Mr. Lygon speak. Now, the rest of you have had your say.
Well, the point is that we're going bankrupt. The talk at this time about spending more money,
I'm talking about issuing it, not spending it.
I fail to see the difference.
There's a very big one.
Ask anyone in business.
You ask them. You got more friends there.
Settle down, Frank, please.
I was about to say, ask anyone in business, and they'll tell you that if they ran their enterprises on the basis of spending money they haven't got, they wouldn't just end up bankrupt. They'd be prosecuted for fraud.
Well, look, we're not running a business. We're running a country. And that's rather more complex. Too complex for you to understand, apparently.
Well, the same rules apply.
No.
It's plain common sense.
You must not give us the issue.
All right. Just exactly what are you proposing, Joe?
Economies. Try to bolster our gold reserves. And I think we should postpone our plans on social services. The government's got to set an example. We won't get back on our feet without tightening our belts.
Plenty of room for you to tighten yours, brother. The bloke in the street's down to his last notch now. There's thousands of them out of work. The men who put us here. The banks are squeezing them. The employers are squeezing them. Big business. We should be stopping it. They're crying out to us to protect them. Do you want us to squeeze them as well?
We're not helping them by living in a dream world. We must face facts.
Look, there's nothing fairy tale about a fiduciary issue. Now, I'll spell it out again because I don't think everyone around this table's understood it. 1, we expand the note issue by £18 million. 2, a third of the money goes to help the farmers. 3, the rest of the money is deployed to create new jobs. Now, 4, new jobs means increased production, and increased production equals real wealth. In other words, in a few months, the fiduciary issue will no longer be fiduciary. It'll be backed by real productivity.
Well, if it's that simple, if it's that sure a thing, why are our bankers all opposed to it?
Because like you, if you'll excuse my saying so, they know all about running a business. They know next to nothing about running a country.
So Craig, that person who's finished speaking there, that was the treasurer, Red Ted Theodore. That's what he wanted it for. That was his logic, and the Commonwealth Bank then stopped him. So after the break, we're going to talk about what the consequences were. right, so welcome back to the CEC Report, where we're discussing Australia has already had a Royal Commission to banks apply it. And Craig, before the break, we showed the video of Red Ted Theodore saying we need to put money out into the economy through the Commonwealth Bank, and at the time the Commonwealth Bank refused. So that led to a Royal Commission in 1936, which handed down its findings in 1937.
Can I just say, Robbie, what Ted Theodore was trying to do was he was going to create $18 million of what's called pounds, of fiduciary credit, which is basically credit issued by the Commonwealth Bank without the backing of gold, because at that time it had to be backed by gold. And this was to be spent into the public works and other sorts of infrastructure projects.
6 million for farmers, 12 million for public
And the
works.
idea was to stimulate demand, because there was a big deflationary cycle at that time in the economy, and the entire economy was collapsing because people weren't spending, they weren't buying things, right? So that's what it was about. Now, that whole idea, right, would have saved Australia from the Depression. It was a political decision, as you mentioned, by the Robert Gibson, not to do that. So the entirety of the suffering that was done through the Great Depression was in fact a political decision.
So the question was, what right did Sir Robert Gibson, who was the governor of the bank, but the bank was owned by the government, so therefore he's a public servant, what right did he have to refuse an order from the government? And what this Royal Commission did, and it was called by the Lions Menzies government. They weren't friends of the Labor view, right? But the Royal Commission nevertheless ruled that at the end of the day, the government is the ultimate authority in the banking system, that Gibson should have obeyed the orders back then. The government, and Craig, when they say government, they don't say an independent statutory authority like the Reserve Bank that's independent of politics. No, the politically motivated, elected government is in charge of the financial system. That was the ruling. And it was those rulings were ignored until Chifley, who as I said, had been on the Royal Commission himself, and Curtin came to power in World War II, and then they applied them to great success. And what they did is they took all the private banks and put them on the strongest leash you can imagine. They made them put 20% of their capital in the Commonwealth Bank and keep it there, so that's what made them secure. And the Commonwealth Bank called the shots. Now, at no time under this regime were those banks not profitable. No. They were always profitable, right? But the economy benefited first before they did. That's how the system worked.
They were also forced to actually extend credit into areas where they didn't want to, like agriculture, for example.
And now I want to mention two things in the time I've got left. Chifley has gone down in history. Some people confuse him as a communist because he tried to nationalise the banks. That was his secondary option. All he wanted to do was make these wartime controls permanent. That were the recommendations of the Royal Commission. And the private banking system organised a rebellion against him, basically, with the Liberal Party. Ironically, what he proposed has sit in the post-GFC period, by people motivated to save private banks, has happened. The British government nationalised all its major banks in 2008 to save them, right? Was that communism? No. And there's a guy who's part of the Minneapolis Fed in the United States named Neil Kashkari. He is calling for the same thing, where Chifley said banks should be treated like utilities, electricity companies, gas companies, etc., and not private companies, and they should have 20% of their capital in the Commonwealth Bank, etc. He's proposing the same thing because the crisis has brought us to that point, right? And so Chifley was well ahead of his time. My point is, it's there. We had the recommendations. What the government of Australia has to do now is stop shirking its responsibilities, take charge of the banks and make them do what they've got to do. But we're out of time. So thanks for tuning in. Tune in next week for more of the CEC Report.